What's up, movie fans? Guys, we just recently got the Fantastic Four First Steps, the fifth Fantastic Four movie. And so today I am going to be ranking all 5 Fantastic Four movies from the worst to the best. If you saw my review of the Fantastic Four First Steps, you know that in that video, I stated I think the Fantastic Four have had a terrible cinematic history. So this is actually going to be a mostly negative video because there's not a lot of these movies that I like. Let's just get into it, starting with number 5, Fant4stic 2015. Now, I saw this movie once when I was a little kid, so I didn't have, the best memory of it. I remember it being a very dumb movie, but I didn't remember the specifics. So I rewatched the movie to prepare for this video, and after rewatching it, I think this is the worst comic book movie that I have ever seen. I mean that wholeheartedly. There's a lot of terrible comic book movies that I haven't seen before, but I have seen movies like Superman 4, Batman and Robin, Suicide Squad, Justice League, Morbius, and I am saying with full confidence that this movie is worse than all of them. This is a film that manages to, quite impressively, do nothing right. The first half of the movie is a boring slog where it's the Fantastic Four plus the guy who's going to become Doctor Doom working on this interdimensional portal thing. It takes a very, very long time for them to complete it. And during all of that time, they don't really bond or become friends that much. You're just watching them work on a portal thing in this super boring, drawn-out montage that goes on for way too long. Then, halfway through the movie, they get their powers, and at that point, you might be thinking, oh, maybe from here the movie gets better, because now it won't be as boring, right? No, now the movie is even worse. Now, instead of it being too slow and boring, they're going to rush everything. Did you want to see the Fantastic Four actually use and learn to use their powers? Nah, we're gonna cut right back by that. We're 1 year in the future now. Take that. We don't get to see the Fantastic Four bonding at all. We don't get to see them growing as characters. We're just gonna speed run all of that. This movie managed to simultaneously be too slow and too fast. Both of the major pacing issues at the same time, which should not be physically possible, but somehow this movie pulls it off. And like I said, you don't really get any time where the Fantastic Four bonds. There's supposed to be a family, that's what the Fantastic Four is supposed to be, but in this movie, they don't even feel like co-workers. They feel like they've been vaguely acquainted. This movie's version of Doctor Doom is super generic and boring. This movie's final battle is super generic and boring. It has all of the superhero movie final battle tropes, including a sky beam and also the characters realizing that they have to work together to stop the bad guy in this super cliche moment. This is an absolute cinematic abomination that it's just terrible on basically every level. And then you get to the end of the movie, and you have that moment that has become absolutely iconic at this point. I gotta say, it's fantastic. Say it again? I don't even know what else to say about that part. Number 4, Fantastic Four 1994. to be honest, this movie barely qualifies as an actual movie, and it barely made it on this list. And I know that a lot of people are probably, like, shocked at this current moment because they probably didn't even know that this movie existed. Basically, if you don't know, in the 90s, the studio that owned the film rights to the Fantastic Four, I think they were called Constantine Studios or something like that, they had to make a Fantastic Four movie by a certain date in order to keep the rights, because if they didn't, the rights would go back to Marvel. But they weren't ready to make a Fantastic Four movie yet. They were going through problems finding a distributor, a bunch of production and budget issues. So they were faced with this terrible situation where they had to make a movie, but they physically couldn't make a movie. So what they decided to do was make an incredibly low-budget Fantastic Four movie for just $1 million and never release it. That was their strategy. Just make a movie, show it to Marvel so that they could keep the rights, and then never release the movie. And the worst part, the part of the story that I consider to be very scummy, is they did not tell the director or the cast that the movie they were working on was never going to come out, which, once again, is very scummy. But the thing is, it did eventually come out through piracy. This movie is only available to watch through pirated copies, one of which is actually on YouTube right now. That's how I watched this movie. This movie is quite a fascinating experience to watch because it is a terrible film from a filmmaking perspective. Like, this movie was very clearly made on a super small budget where, like, everything about the movie looks terrible. Most of the movie sounds terrible. Like the effects with Johnny's fire abilities, Reed's stretching abilities look atrocious. I will say the effects on Sue actually don't look that bad, and the practical costume that they had for the Thing also didn't look that bad, so I'll give the movie credit for that. It's a very fascinating experience because it is very clearly not a movie that was ever supposed to be seen. But the thing that is fascinating about this movie that put it over Fant4stic for me is that this movie's story is pretty good. Like, I would say if this movie was given a proper budget, it probably would have been better than the Tim Story movies, because this film's story is a very, like, classic version of the Fantastic Four's origin, where I think it understands the characters and their dynamic a lot more. I think this is easily the best version of Doctor Doom that we have in a Fantastic Four movie, because he's not just a generic mad scientist. He is the leader of Latveria in this movie. This is the only Fantastic Four movie to really explore that side of him. But he also has that rivalry with Reed that kind of powers the entire story of the movie. There's a scene in this movie that I really, really like where Reed kind of, like, talks to the rest of the Four, and he kind of makes them realize that all of their powers basically fit their personality traits, and that they have an opportunity to turn their greatest, like, personality defects into their greatest strengths, which I thought was a very cool scene. So yeah, I think the fact that this movie was made the way that it was is a really big shame. Take this script and give it a bigger budget, it could have been a really cool film. Number 3, Fantastic Four 2005, the first of the Tim Story duology. And this is a movie that a lot of people have a lot of nostalgia for. So it is looked back on a little bit more fondly today. But as somebody who has no nostalgia for this movie, as somebody who literally watched this movie for the first time around 3 years ago, I can confidently say that this movie is not good. Okay, I will say it's not atrocious. It's not the worst thing in the world. I think it has a lot of cool things in it. I think that in general, the four themselves aren't that bad. The Thing, I think, is easily the best part of this movie. I love his character arc. He's basically the main character of this film. And I love his arc where he's kind of accepting what happened to him and kind of finding the new skills that he has as the Thing and, like, looking past the fact that he now looks like a monster. Like, I really liked that entire character arc. Johnny, he doesn't really have an arc in this movie, which kinda sucks because he's a bit of an insufferable jerk for most of this movie, and he probably should have gone through some character development. But even though he doesn't have an arc, he's really, really funny, so that's something. I'd say Sue is definitely the weakest of the four in the Tim Story films. She just doesn't really get a lot of characterization. But, you know, they did a good job with Reed. He's comes across as, like, the intelligent, logical member of the team very well, but he's also able to step up and be the leader. Like, yeah. I think that the four themselves are fine. Their dynamic, I wouldn't say is that great in this movie, and that's really the big problem with this film. Most of the movie is literally just the Fantastic Four arguing about their powers. That is 90% of this movie's runtime. And, like, I don't know, their constant bickering just doesn't really do a lot to really sell them as a team and sell them as a family, which once again is what the Fantastic Four are supposed to be. And then the other big problem that I have with this movie, and I really hate to say this because his actor recently passed away, but I don't like this movie's version of Doctor Doom that much. I just think he's a little bit too much of a generic mad scientist. His story in this movie is kind of a ripoff of Green Goblin's story in the first Spider-Man. And I don't know, I just think that, like, he's a little bit too campy, a little bit too jokey. Like, I'm not a big fan of this movie's version of Doctor Doom. And another thing that I think really sucks about this movie is that it's just a very goofy movie if you apply, like, logic to a lot of the things that happen in this movie, especially with, like, minor supporting characters and extras and stuff, where, like, there's a scene early on in this movie after Johnny gets his powers where he's being, like, looked at by this one nurse, and she takes his temperature, and he has, like, a 200-degree fever, and she's concerned for a second, but then Johnny asks her out to go skiing. So then from there, she's like, oh, okay, Chris Evans is into me. I guess I should disregard all of my concern here. And then, while they are skiing, Johnny catches on fire and is perfectly fine afterwards. Does this nurse freak out about this? No, once again, Chris Evans is into her, and now his clothes burned off, so then they do adult activities in the hot tub he created. Like, that's the type of supporting character and extra that this movie has. That is not the only example, but I can't spend too much time on the others. This movie's supporting cast is just filled with a lot of really weird and dumb characters. And so, yeah, it's a very stupid movie that has a lot of flaws. But it's not unwatchable, and I think it's definitely better than the two movies that are below this. Number 2, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. This is the second movie in the Tim Story duology. The general consensus is that this is the worst of the two, and after watching this movie for the first time a couple of weeks ago, I have to say, you're all wrong. This movie is better than 2005. Like, it's still not a great movie. It has a lot of problems, but this one I think is actually okay and quite a bit more watchable than the three movies that are below this on the list. I think the most improved aspect of Rise of the Silver Surfer is the team dynamic. They actually do kind of feel like a family in this one. I like their family dynamic with each other. I like the arcs that they give the characters. Like, the Thing doesn't really have an arc in this movie, but he had an arc in the first movie, so that's not that big of a deal. But I like kind of the relationship troubles that Reed and Sue are going through in this movie. And I actually really liked, like, their relationship with each other in this movie. And then with Johnny, they do this whole plot line where after he fights Silver Surfer for the first time, he has this weird ability where when he touches one of the other members of the team, he switches powers with them. And I thought that that was actually a really fun plot line, and it actually did a lot to humble Johnny in this movie, which I definitely thought was something that needed to happen after the first movie. And so, yeah, I like their team dynamic. The other thing that I like about this movie is the Silver Surfer. I think he is a way more compelling antagonist than Doctor Doom, and I really like how throughout the first half of this movie he kind of just comes across as this unfeeling, mysterious villain, but then as you get into the second half and you learn about Galactus, he becomes a lot more sympathetic and interesting. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things about this movie that I think this film actually does quite a bit better than the first movie. With that being said, this is still not a great movie. It still has a lot of very dumb things in it. Doctor Doom is still in this movie. He's a supporting antagonist in this film, where throughout a lot of the movie he's actually helping the Fantastic Four, but then there's this twist that is super obvious where it turns out he was up to no good the whole time. And like, it's not as egregious as a lot of the stuff that they do in the first movie, but still, I'm not crazy about this version of Doctor Doom. And then the big thing that everyone hates about this movie's version of Galactus is really dumb, where I guess they were too scared that it would be silly if they showed Galactus, so instead, he's a cloud in this movie. Just straight up a big cloud, and in the middle of the cloud you can vaguely see his shadow. That's what they do with Galactus in this movie. It's very, very dumb, even sillier than just showing Galactus. And so, yeah, you know, the movie, it has problems, but I don't hate this one, and I don't think it's as bad as the other three movies that we've talked about so far. But coming in at number 1, and this is perhaps the easiest number 1 that I have ever had in a ranking video, The Fantastic Four: First Steps. For reference, I would give Rise of the Silver Surfer a 6 out of 10, and I would give First Steps a 9 out of 10. This movie is way better than any of the other Fantastic Four movies. And yeah, it's just easily the number one spot on this list. This film just does everything better than the other movies, where I just think that this movie has a better story. The whole movie is about the Fantastic Four preparing for Sue to have a baby. And then while they're preparing for that, and it's supposed to be a joyous occasion, they learn that Galactus is coming. And so the entire movie kind of becomes this very tragic story where there's just a ton of dread surrounding it and a ton of emotion as the Fantastic Four is trying to find a way to stop Galactus so that they can preserve the life of their planet and also the life of Reed and Sue's child. And it is a very emotional, tragic film. I think Galactus is a terrifying villain in this movie, where they actually did show him in this film, and it did not come across as silly. It came across as terrifying as you just see the scale of him. I think the family dynamic is fantastic in this movie. I just really love what they do with all four of the characters, where with Johnny, he's still the comic relief, but he also is a little bit smarter, and he has a lot of like really interesting things going on with him in a subplot in this movie. I like Reed and Sue's entire character arc in this movie as they're trying to prepare for the arrival of their child, and they're desperately trying to find a way to save their world. Ben is definitely the one who gets a little bit less to do in this movie, but he's still a very fun supporting character. I love this movie's gender-swapped Silver Surfer. I thought that she was a fantastic addition. There's just a lot of things that really worked about this movie, and it's also the most stylish of the Fantastic Four movies, since this film takes place in a very different world with kind of this retro futuristic aesthetic. It's a very sci-fi movie. Like, yeah, Fantastic Four First Steps, this is a great movie. The rest of the franchise, not so great. So this was a pretty easy pick for number one. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Comment down below, what Fantastic Four movie is your favorite and why is it First Steps? And see ya, movie fans.